All right, I think we will go ahead and get started today. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Gherkin and Cucumber for Effective Test Automation. I just wanted to go through some introductions very quickly. My name is Amy Huey, and I am on the marketing team here at SmartBear, and today I'm joined by Prashant Mohan, who is the product manager for TestComplete. And next, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and it will be sent to all attendees and registrants in the next couple days. If you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A panel rather than the chat box. The Q&A box is where we will be monitoring the questions and making sure that we can keep track of whether we've answered it or not. And then finally, we do have a few poll questions for you guys. These keep the session interactive and they just help us know what kind of content is relevant for you as we continue to develop presentations and webinars in the future. So that is it from me, and then I will go ahead and pass it over to Prashant.
All right, thank you, Amy. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Prashant Mohan, I'm the product manager at SmartBear, working primarily on the TestComplete product. So I've been with SmartBear for about 2 years now, prior to which I was a QA engineer myself. So to sort of understand some of the problems that I face, and I'm trying to solve that with TestComplete and the other products that SmartBear has. We'll be talking about essentially 4 things. So first, we'll go into a high-level overview of behavior-driven development itself, and then we'll move on to how Gherkin, Cucumber, and test automation fit into the BDD space. Then we'll get into some of the tools that SmartBear does offer. So we'll get into how TestComplete accelerates the test automation aspect in this paradigm. And then finally, how HipTest, another product here at SmartBear, brings together a business and technology in this paradigm. And by this paradigm, essentially behavior-driven development. All right, so just to start off with SmartBear itself and what our vision is. So we help organizations such as yours to manage, design, test, and monitor several aspects of your code, your applications itself, and the processes across the entire software development lifecycle. And putting that into perspective in the tooling that we offer. So we offer a variety of tools that fit into different aspects of the software development lifecycle. And today we'll primarily be focusing on 2 of them. So HipTest and TestComplete is what we'll be talking about today in the context of behavior-driven development. Of course, if you have any questions on any of the other products, we're happy to answer them as well. All right, so this is what is happening today, right? So we're talking about a world before behavior-driven development, which for most of us, I believe, is today, right? So from a business owner's perspective, there's a bunch of requirements because they're the ones who are speaking to the customers on a daily basis. So this could be a business owner themselves, or a product manager, product owner, a business analyst. So anyone who is responsible for interacting with the customer to get specific requirements. So let's say in our case, a new company, a brand new company wants to disrupt the soda market, and they come up with this cool orange-based soda that wants to take on Pepsi and Coke. And essentially, one of the requirements is that they want a can that opens, right? And so the business owner then comes back and then speaks to the developer about a can that can open, right? So what the developer then eventually understands is that they need a can to be opened, right? So That's what they come up with. And a quality engineer, a quality assurance engineer or a tester understands that from what the developer has built is that, yes, that deodorant definitely opens. And so the point here is you can see the miscommunication between what the customer is really hoping for versus what we're delivering from a product perspective and what is actually being tested. And so this is definitely not rocket science. It's a simple methodology, a simple collaboration aspect that is missing today, unfortunately. So in comes the concept of behavior-driven development. Right, so simply put, it is a collaborative approach to software development that bridges the communication gap between business and technology. Right, so very straightforward. There's nothing new or nothing that is difficult to do. It's simply just talking to each other. And what that then finally does is it helps teams communicate requirements with more precision. Right? If you're talking to each other, there's questions, there's answers, there's arguments, and these are a good thing. And it's good that this happens even before a single line of code is written. So this methodology also helps you to discover these defects early and eventually produce software that remains maintainable over time. And the important aspect is you are actually delivering what the customer really is looking for. So when the pioneers of the BDD movement uh, uh, discovered and sort of came up with this practice, they had something in mind. Right? So the first step towards behavior-driven development is essentially the discovery process. So, as they famously put it, the three amigos, the business analyst, the developer, and the QA person or the tester, essentially just get together and come up with a shared understanding through collaboration and structured conversations. Again, so the first step of this movement is essentially to speak with each other, to make sure that everyone understands what really is required from a product perspective. So once that is done, now this is not always straightforward in that there's a lot of back and forth and it takes a lot of time, but it is important that this is done to a large extent before you move into the next one. So once you do come up with a reasonably standard shared understanding of what needs to be built, you try to formulate those ideas that you came up with together. So you simply come up with examples of your system behavior, and these are documented simply as scenarios. So questions are asked. The business owner or the product manager is required to answer everything from a customer's perspective, from a user's perspective, in how things are meant to be working. And the good thing here is that the developers and the testers are empowered to actually influence the product development right from the beginning. So it's important. Usually, even when I was a QA engineer myself, I didn't come into the process until very very late, until the last let's say 20% of that specific sprint, and then so I basically didn't have any context of why something was being built. So these two steps simply provide the entire team a context and a meaning to what is being built. And then finally, once the user scenarios are documented in a given way, these need to be automated such that they do actually verify the system's behavior. So there's a couple of tools here that are very very common. One is just a simple syntax called Gherkin. In a given when then format. It's just very easy, simple to use, simple to understand, and we'll talk about a little bit more about Gherkin itself and why it's so great. And Cucumber to run those Gherkin tests. So you need a test runner. Cucumber does a great job of converting those or running those Gherkin scenarios and statements and creating very nice readable reports. But like, most of us, this is how it's meant to be practiced. But in reality, everything is different, right? And I think back to a time when when someone uh, gives me something to do and also expects something out of me. So one example that comes to mind for me is when I was younger, and my dad was like, "Hey, if you do your homework, you clean your room, we'll go out for ice cream." And all I heard was, "We'll go out for ice cream." So I didn't think about cleaning my room or doing my homework, but I was like, okay, what ice cream store are we going to? What flavor should we get? And that's what I see. That's what we see that's happening here. We see these three steps: discovery, formulation, automation. But all we really picked up from this is the automation aspect. And in reality, most teams are just simply using Gherkin and Cucumber and terming that as a BDD process. So the three amigos essentially became one amigo, right? So it is the QA team that's somehow taken this concept to the next level and accelerated their test automation practices. So what is meant to be something that happened even before a single code was written was then uh, adopted by the QA organizations across different teams to accelerate test automation. Now, the thing about this webinar today is that we're not here to tell you that this is not a good way to practice BDD. We're here to help you on that journey towards finally BDD. But we're like, hey, if you use this for test automation, it's not a bad thing at all. What happens now is test automation is more efficient, it's more accessible, and it's focused on real customer scenarios. Now, I'm pretty sure there's no one out there who thinks that this is a bad idea. Right? So we've taken a specific element of a big concept and applied it to our daily jobs. And as a result, we're just making things much more streamlined and easier, not just for us, but the other stakeholders involved in test automation. And this is the first step towards a full-blown behavior-driven development process. So for the rest of the webinar, right, we're not going to preach you on the best way to approach BDD, but we're going to help you improve your test automation using specific aspects of BDD. And the first thing that we start is with Gherkin. Right? Gherkin is great. It defines your scenarios from a user's perspective. So a simple given, when, then syntax is clear, is concise, and understood by everyone in the team, no matter how technical or non-technical you are. And what's more, the customer themselves can understand this, and many times they can validate if this is as expected. There's a clear emphasis on description and declaration, right? So it's you're writing these statements in a form where you're declaring something from a user's perspective, and at the same time it's extremely descriptive, such that there's no ambiguity at all. And finally, it is readily understood. So as we were talking about before, these simple given, when, then statements are easily understood by every person in your team. And once you do finally finish your test automation activities, you simply pass on this report to your stakeholders, and they understand exactly what the product is meant to do. And it's all driven through your test automation process. So again, the way that we adopt this whole concept is through test automation, which is not a bad thing. So this is the first aspect of test automation within the BDD paradigm. It's first simply writing your user scenarios in a simple Gherkin format. Now we need to run these scenarios such that they can actually be converted into automation tests, and they can be reused and reliably and continuously driven. So Cucumber is probably the most common tool out there that does this. There are other tools, SpecFlow, Lettuce, and other variants of Cucumber, but Cucumber is the most widely used tool out there. So the first thing that this does is it converts the Gherkin statements into simple step definitions that are bound, and then you can go in and fill in your automation code easily right there. So the other advantages of using something such as Cucumber is that there's different versions available for different programming languages. Even though Java is the most popular one, there's several variants for several programming languages available out there. You can use reusable step definitions. So you create a step definition once, and many times we can reuse them across different Gherkin statements. So it just keeps your test automation code more streamlined and reusable. So that's another very important aspect when your test automation suite becomes larger and larger. Now you can express your step definitions and your automation code through parameters that are driven by those Gherkin statements. So again, when it comes to streamlining your test automation code, it's nothing better than that. It's you can simply data drive your tests through simple Gherkin, and then have one piece of automation code that then drives that automation test. So instead of having several tests with several data sets or an Excel sheet, you simply have your Gherkin file written in a format that can then be expressed through parameters in your step definition code. So this is the second aspect of test automation in BDD, is to be able to run those Gherkin statements. So Cucumber is the most common tool out there. All right, so quick question before we proceed. So which test runner do you use to run Gherkin scenarios? And we have a bunch of options there. There's probably others too. So if there's anything else, simply please use the other option.
And maybe we can take this time to answer a question or two.
All right, I'm just going through. Oof, so there's a question. How do I get rid of the black bar covering the part of the screen? I wonder what that black bar is. Oh, the one at the bottom.
Oh, unfortunately, I'm not sure if that can go away. But I don't think any of our content is below that bar, so.
Yep. So I'm just reading some questions. So there's an interesting question. Is it more difficult to collaborate when there's just one amigo? Yes, absolutely. But that's how we've unfortunately adopted it, right? The ideal way is to get all three of the amigos to come together. But you need to start somewhere, right? So right now we're seeing most of the QA folks are the ones collaborating amongst themselves. But the next step would be to collaborate with the developers, and then finally the business owners themselves. Yes, so 100% the ideal scenario is for everyone to collaborate at the same time, but it depends on situation to situation. So what we're seeing in the market is that it is the QA team that's doing it. So we're not here to stop that. We're here to encourage that, but your next step should be towards going to the three amigos.
Okay. Should we continue?
Yep, we should continue. All right. So moving on. Yes. So we spoke about two aspects. We spoke about Gherkin and we spoke about Cucumber, right? But then at the end of the day, you still have to write your automation code, right? You need a tool that provides you everything out of the box for full-scale test automation that fits into the Gherkin and Cucumber paradigm, right? So what we have today is simply, if you see the image there, on the top right, you have a Gherkin format with your feature file, your scenarios, your given when then statements, and you can generate step definitions out there via Cucumber. So you have these empty test definitions created here. But the problem is now, how do you fill in this with the automation code itself? Now, there's some alternatives available in the market, but usually it requires you to set up an IDE. It requires you to have some knowledge of programming, either in Java or C#, whichever test runner you end up using. So many times it's just a big lift to get started on this journey. But we have a solution for you now. TestComplete is a automation tool that consumes these Gherkin scenarios, these Gherkin statements, if you already have them created, and then converts them automatically into step definitions. And then you have a powerful platform that can help you record these tests if you're not comfortable in creating tests by yourself, or simply just scripting it in a variety of languages that TestComplete offers to you. And so we can see some of the advantages of this, right? So the first thing is you can get started quickly, right? There's no external IDEs you need. I've seen many QA folk, when they start thinking about Visual Studio and Eclipse, it is a little intimidating sometimes, the fact that you have to go and start coding by yourself. So the one thing with TestComplete is there's no external IDE. It's all built in for you. There's no plugins. So there's nothing of Maven or Cucumber or Test Runner, like TestNG, or anything that needs to be installed. Everything is built in. So we have a Cucumber style Test Runner built into TestComplete. So everything that you would get with a Test Runner outside, you get inside TestComplete itself. There's absolutely no plugins that you need. And finally, there's no coding required, right? You can simply record and play back. But if you do like to code, you can. There's a full-blown IDE in the platform itself that you can code in Python or JavaScript or VBScript and a couple of other old languages, but we see most of our users use JavaScript and Python, and sometimes VBScript if they're coming from other tools. And another important aspect is that you can use this methodology for all different types of applications, right? For web, mobile, and desktop applications. So many of the solutions out there restrict you to the web world because that's it's just the most straightforward, and the open source solutions out there, it's just available for the web world. So the good thing here with TestComplete is that you can practice this methodology. You can get started quickly with any type of application. And then finally, it has everything you need for automation out of the box. So there's automatic object recognition. So when it comes to UI automation itself, the key thing is to be able to actually recognize the objects on the screen using varieties of ways. So our property-based recognition is the standard, is the recommended way, but sometimes objects are more complex. So there are other modes of leveraging this aspect as well, through image and through OCR means. There is a reporting framework available within TestComplete itself. And you can easily integrate with continuous integration systems and source control systems, bug trackers, test management systems. Everything is just comes out of the box. And then finally, we also have a great community. So we have our own SmartBear community with a separate page for each one of our products. Our TestComplete community is one of the most vibrant. So anything that you need, any place that you're stuck in, you always get a solution almost immediately. All right, so we spoke about it. So I want to take a few minutes and show you this in action, right? So let's say, for example, you do start, you have a few Gherkin scenarios. Now you want to convert them into automated tests. So let's see how you would do that in TestComplete. All right, so I'm just gonna switch to TestComplete. All right, so you should be able to see the TestComplete start page here. This is the first thing that shows up when you launch TestComplete. When you download TestComplete, you launch it. You won't have the recent projects, but this is the first page that that comes up. So I'm just going to open a sample project just to walk you through TestComplete in about 2 minutes or so, just to show you the different aspects of TestComplete. So TestComplete is an automation tool that that gives you capabilities by interacting with objects on the UI. And for any type of application, web, mobile, or desktop, even packaged applications. So any types of applications that has a UI, has controls such as buttons, labels, grids, TestComplete can interact with. So on the left-hand side, we have a simple project explorer like any tool. This is where all your assets, your artifacts are stored. So we have different types of tests that you can create. If you have data files, you have images, you can store them, and everything is just neatly aligned and stored here in the project explorer that you can always access. On the right, and then probably the most important part of TestComplete is the project workspace itself. Now, this is where your actual test resides. And this here is an example of a simple keyword test that opens a browser. It searches for an item and verifies if the item has the right price, and then it deletes the item and closes the browser. So a simple test. This is something that you can easily do through record and playback, or you can manually create this keyword test as well by dragging specific operations from this menu here on to the left of the main workspace. TestComplete also comes with a scripting capability. So we spoke about a full-fledged IDE. So here you have an IDE that's available. Here we have JavaScript code simply written to do exactly the same thing that we just described. So if you are comfortable scripting, I encourage you to go in here and give this a try, because there's obviously with scripts you have a lot more flexibility. And I'd say that about half the TestComplete users use the scripting capability, and half of them use the keyword test. So whatever you're comfortable with. The one aspect here that I actually minimized is the visualizer here. So you also can visualize your application as you walk through the steps. So as you walk through the steps in the visualizer, you can see which step it specifically points to in your test case as well. And this is possible with scripts as well. There is an excellent logging capability that we have just to show you, what's happened. We have a summary report. This is essentially what you would share with the upper management, just to show how many tests were executed, how many passed, and this is basically your go no go report that you have with TestComplete. Now, if you want to troubleshoot, you can go further with a lot of details on what was clicked. You have an expected and an actual image here to show you the different actions that you performed within a test. And when a test case did pass, you can see the result, and it shows you the actual value, the expected value. And in case something changed, you can easily update it right within this panel itself. The last thing that I want to talk about TestComplete before diving into the BDD aspect is the name mapping repository. So this is essentially TestComplete's object repository. So every control that you interact with from a UI automation perspective needs a specific object and properties associated with that object. So the good thing about a name mapping repository is that you can keep this independent from the test case itself. So let's say your ID string for a specific object changes, and you use this object across 100 tests. All you need to do is simply come and update this here, and this will propagate to all your tests. There's many other things that you can do within TestComplete, but for today, let's focus in on the BDD aspect. All right, so I'm going to create a simple project. You can choose a scripting language. JavaScript is default, most popular. So let's keep that as is. And there is an option called BDD files here. So check that. And when we hit next, you have 3 options here. One is you can connect to our BDD collaborative tool called HipTest. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. The second thing is if you already have feature files written in Gherkin as a .feature file, you can simply just import them here and everything just automatically gets converted into step definitions. Or if you don't have any Gherkin statements written so far, you can create a new feature file and start from scratch here. So our first demo, we'll simply just import a file that I have. So I have a folder called feature files, and I just import that and I hit finish. So we give TestComplete a couple of seconds, and so you can see, so TestComplete's imported that that feature file with 2 simple scenarios in the embedded Gherkin editor within TestComplete itself. So there is a simple scenario, and there is a slightly more complex scenario called scenario outline with examples. So this means you're able to data drive your test, and this aspect we spoke about at the beginning, where you can simply just data drive your entire test suite through your Gherkin file through examples here. Everything that you have with Gherkin is available out of the box. So the concept of tags, which is very, very popular. So you can tag each one of your scenarios. You can have multiple tags, and then you can also have tag expressions. So if you want simple and add to cart, you can simply do that. And you can run them all through a CI tool or through within or from TestComplete itself. Now from this scenario, you can move into the definition. So you can see here that the step definition is automatically created for you. Right? So there's nothing that you have to do manually to create these empty step definitions that we have here. So now there's 2 ways to approach the next step. Right? The first way is to simply code the automation steps by yourself. So given the SmartBear website is open, so if you are comfortable with JavaScript and TestComplete terminology, you can simply go ahead and fill in the automation code here manually. But in case you are not familiar with JavaScript and not familiar with TestComplete, you can use a really powerful record and playback capability. So that's what we'll do today in this demo. All right, so just gonna make sure that the SmartBear website's open. There you go. So I simply just right-click here, and I have this option called record this routine. So each one of these statements are routines, as in the programming world. So, whoops, I need to go back here. So I'm going to continue. So the first step here you can see is that given that the website is open. So one way you can do that is simply just verify if the SmartBear logo is here. So TestComplete has this smart way of validations where you have this little plus arrow here that comes in where you can simply create a quick checkpoint. So you don't have to go and explore the object itself. You can just simply select the operation right from here. So I'm just going to hit this. I'm going to make sure that that it is true. Now, because I can't see the recording widget, I'm just going to stop this and then move on to the next step manually. What the recording widget does do is it provides a nice next button for you such that you can move through the steps automatically. So I'm just going to remove all of this. All this is not required. I can go in here and perform my next step. All right, so the next step is essentially I navigate to the TestComplete page. So the way to do that is by simply going to the product section and going to TestComplete itself. All right, so I'm going to wait for that to happen. And so you can see here that simply that code has been recorded. So what you're doing here is just clicking on the button. You can see the images corresponding to that piece of code. And then finally, you want to verify that the page has successfully loaded. So this is the then statement. And so you simply just want to verify, let's say our simple test, we're just verifying that the header title is as expected. So the easiest to use automated UI testing tool with artificial intelligence. So just to be clear, so when you're actually recording it, you don't have to click on that stop. You can use our little recording widget, which is hiding behind the second monitor, which I can't retrieve, unfortunately. But this is the outcome of the recording process. So you have a couple of validations that you performed and a couple of clicks, and then now you've successfully run or created your test that is bound to your first Gherkin scenario. So you saw in a matter of a couple of minutes, you were able to get started on your BDD journey, where you're able to create, first of all, your Gherkin scenarios. You're able to translate them into automation code in a very straightforward manner. And the automation code is automatically filled in for you. The good thing is that all your objects are automatically mapped. So we spoke about the objects that need to be identified. We have a bunch of other things here. These happen because I clicked on random items in my Explorer toolbar, but that's not important. It's just the browser itself. You can see how neatly TestComplete has listed down the different objects that you're interacting with. So this essentially is the link TestComplete that we clicked on. So once you have created your test, you can either run the project itself, or you can run a specific scenario. So if we were to go and run through this, so let me just get back to the original state. So I'm just going to say right click here and say run this scenario. So TestComplete is navigating to the TestComplete page very quickly and validating if that header is as expected. So as you can see, it happened really quickly. Our test case passed. You can deep dive into each step that happened. So given the SmartBear website is open, so you're just checking if the logo indeed exists. Then when I navigate to the TestComplete page, so there's a couple of steps that you performed here. So it tells you exactly what you recorded and what happened during recording and playback. And then the second step, where you're clicking on the TestComplete button itself. And then finally, the text that you are verifying. So this is a very neat, concise way of being able to get started on your journey, right? And we spoke about everything within TestComplete itself. Now, obviously, you can run this through, you can trigger this through a CI tool. We've seen people do that through Jenkins. So the scenarios can be accessed through our command line interface or our REST API, where you can simply use an external tool to drive these tests automatically. All right. So we have another poll question for you. So what automation tool do you use to create code for your Gherkin features? Maybe we can answer a few questions meanwhile as well.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions, so plenty to choose from.
All right, can you show us a failed scenario? Yes, so in the next demo, we'll show you a failed scenario. So that's good. That was the latest one that was asked. Okay, so what is the advantage of using Gherkin over writing scripts and keyword tests directly? I think that's a good question. I think that comes back to how we started the three amigos and just getting everyone on the same page as far as your test automation activities are concerned. So the good thing about Gherkin is, first of all, everything is in plain language. Now, we only saw English here, but you can use one of, I think, 150 languages, I think, that's built into the TestComplete platform. So the key thing there is that all your tests are in plain English or plain language. And so if you have to make a change to your automation test, you just have to edit the Gherkin statement, and you don't need to touch your automation code itself. And the most important aspect that I see personally is that these tests get once they run, the report is just very, very readable or legible, such that you can share it with anyone. All the advantages of Gherkin that we went through a few minutes ago is why this is very, very important. Another aspect is just data driving your test. You can simply data drive it from your Gherkin statements itself. All right, I'm just gonna get a couple more questions. So I'm guessing you'll touch on cross-browser testing. So yes, so you can either parameterize that through your Gherkin statement itself. When you say, given the SmartBear website is launched in Chrome, and you can use the data tables to drive that, and then the automation code will pick up based on the on the specific browser that you want to run. So TestComplete works with any browser out there. So so you can simply just use that as a parameter into your step definition. All right, how do you identify elements in desktop applications? Exactly the same way that you would with web applications. So we have something called as the object spy, where you can spy on any element on your desktop application, and it will retrieve its properties. When I move into TestComplete next, we can just quickly go through the concept of the object repository and the object browser to retrieve its properties. All right, let's move on. So we have 15 minutes to go, and at least one more demo. So I'm just going to quickly move on. All right. So there is still one problem here, right? So we saw Gherkin, we saw Cucumber, we saw a test automation tool. But I know some of you will be asking, okay, so some of my non-technical users probably want to do nothing related with TestComplete. Like, hey, I'm contributing to the Gherkin scenarios, but I want to do that in a platform that's easy for me to access. I don't want to download it to TestComplete. I'm not going to perform the automation itself, right? So, and we have a solution for that as well. So HipTest is simply a platform to define this acceptance criteria in the Gherkin format in a SaaS-based tool. So it's you can easily collaborate across any team member. So anyone can access this because it's a simple URL, a team-based application where you can have multiple teams accessing the same project and contributing to it. And finally, once the tests are automated, you have a living documentation that can be shared with the entire team. So everyone knows exactly what the product is meant to do. Now you might be asking, okay, so you showed me TestComplete, and you're talking about HipTest. Now, can they integrate, right? That is the key thing. And yes, so there is a real-time sync between HipTest and TestComplete that we'll go through now real quick. All right, so yeah, so this is what I want to show here. So let's just move that in there. So I'm just going to quickly show you HipTest and how HipTest and TestComplete very nicely integrate with each other. So HipTest is a simple SaaS-based platform. This is the first thing that you see when you log in. You'll see a list of all the projects that you have. Now, for the purpose of this demo, and for if you are interested in a HipTest and TestComplete integration, we have an example project called the Smart Store, and this project is specifically designed to showcase the integration between the two tools. I'm going to hit create here, and in a couple of seconds, the project is created in HipTest. So you can see here that SmartBear TestComplete with today's date, and number 2 here, because I did give this a trial run before our webinar just to make sure that it's working as expected. So this is the second iteration of that same project. So the main things about HipTest, I'm not going to deep dive too much into HipTest, but the key thing is the ability to define these Gherkin scenarios in a very easy to use and intuitive editor. So you have the given when then statements that you can easily create. If you have more complex tests with data driven items, you can create the same tests, you can parameterize them, you can add your items to the data tables. So everything is nice and modular and independent, and everything is just very sleek and easy to use. So a non-technical user, someone who doesn't want to get into TestComplete itself, can simply live within HipTest itself. All right, so now is the fun part. Now, how do we translate all of this that's in HipTest into TestComplete, right? So we have a couple of scenarios. Now we want to get those into TestComplete and start automating them. So I'm going to close this project and start a fresh one. So I'm going to leave the default language as JavaScript. I'm going to hit the BDD files option. And this time I'm going to select the first option. So I have all my credentials already set up. I can sign in via email, or if you have a Google or GitHub account, you can sign in via that too. And hit next. So TestComplete simply calls the HipTest API and retrieves all the projects that are associated with your instance. So if you remember, the project that we created was a SmartBear TestComplete, today's date, version 2. So I'm going to click on that and hit finish. So HipTest has very nice APIs that we leveraged, and essentially we're pulling out everything that you created in HipTest into TestComplete in exactly the same form that you saw a couple of minutes ago, with simply importing regular Gherkin files that you have stored locally. So everything works exactly the same way. You have your step definitions. Yes, in the beginning, you have empty step definitions, so you can create your tests either manually or through record and playback. And the important aspect here is now what happens when you do update a scenario here, right? You might be wondering, okay, so you've created the scenario. Now the analyst decides to add one more step. So I'm going to add another step here, price, and the price is too high, just as an example step here. Just going to spell this right. And I'm going to hit enter. So let's say one step has been added to the scenario. So we want that to reflect in TestComplete as well. So all you need to do is simply go and update from HipTest. So there is a real-time connectivity between HipTest and TestComplete, and TestComplete then pulls in that specific test here. Now I'm pretty sure you're wondering, okay, so you showed me a one-way sync. What happens if the automation engineer decides that this specific step is not important anymore, and after communication and collaboration, they decide that this is a step that they don't need anymore? So the good thing is we have a bidirectional sync between TestComplete and HipTest. So let's say we delete this step here, and we save the TestComplete project and we go into HipTest. So in a couple of seconds, you should see that that specific step is gone, and the feature file here has been updated with the change that you just made. So I think that's the coolest part between this integration is the real-time sync between the two tools. So you can have people live within HipTest to create the Gherkin scenarios, and you can have automation engineers live within TestComplete to create automation code while maintaining that real-time sync between the two tools. Now, finally, once you do run the tests, you want the results to come back into HipTest so that you can have a single source of truth for everything. So the test runs option here is an important aspect of the HipTest platform. So for this demo, we'll create a new test run called TestComplete Demo. We're going to include all the test cases. We only have 2 scenarios in this case, so it's not that many. And we're going to create a test run. And you can see that the test run has been created in HipTest, but it is in the gray state because the tests haven't been actually run so far. So we go back into TestComplete. There is a configuration option available called within the project properties called hip test. And there is an option here called test run. So you can choose what test run you want to associate TestComplete and hip test with. By default, TestComplete always selects the last test run. So in our case, it would have selected the test run that we just created. It was just to show you that we do have real connectivity here as well. It brings out all the test runs that are associated with that specific hip test project. So in our case, we're going to explicitly select TestComplete demo and save the project. Now, we did not create any test automation code, so the test will fail, right? So, but I want to show you how a failure is also happens and how that information gets passed into a hip test. So I'm just going to go simply run this scenario here. So obviously everything's running really quickly because there's no automation code, but what we're doing here is we're sending this information back into a hip test. And so the first thing that you see is the error. The simple error message is that, hey, you haven't implemented anything. So it's a not implemented error. And the good thing is that you can see now is that we've updated one of the tests within our test runs. So we did run only one test. You can see the first scenario that we ran, add item to cart and verify price. So that has run and it failed, and you also get the exact error that happened. Basically providing you a full all-round view of your entire test, your automation code, and your execution run in the BDD paradigm. So this is pretty cool. So putting that all into perspective, right? So now how hip test and TestComplete truly accelerates your test automation aspects, right? So we saw three aspects. We saw discovery, formulation, test automation, and we also have another aspect now called living documentation that is stored within hip test itself. So once you do run your tests, you have documentation that is updated truly, that you can share amongst all team members and even customers in some cases. Right. So the first step, discovery. So there's no tooling required here. It's basically just getting everyone on the same page. You use hip test to then define your Gherkin given when then scenarios. You use TestComplete to automate those scenarios with real-time sync. And then finally, once you do run the tests, you can bring them back into hip test and maintain living documentation. And you can truly do this over and over again, along with integration with the most popular tools out there. So you can do this with an integration with Jira, with Git. If you have everything in source control, you can always have that as a single point where TestComplete connects to Git, hip test is connected to Git, and everything is nice and versioned for you. And of course, you can use Jenkins and Azure as well to run your tests in a continuous form. All right, so just a final thing that I want to touch on here is that many times we might think about building our own BDD frameworks, right? So there's a lot of tools out there. There's open source tools for test automation. It might be very tempting to go and build your own framework. So there's a couple of things that I found while building the framework during my QA time. I found that the whole process was a little inefficient. It just takes a lot of time. I lose focus on the aspect of testing itself, and I focus on building my framework. And things keep changing all the time, and I have to maintain my framework. So the whole point was lost because everything was just too slow, and I had to have too many people work on it. It was expensive, right? I spent many hours on building this framework. Had help from many resources. So the whole exercise was too expensive. And finally, it was risky, right? Given that I'm focused more on now building this very robust framework, I just miss on certain bugs that I need to catch, what I'm actually doing there as a QA engineer. So it's a risky proposition. And the funny thing is these are the same reasons why we moved from a manual process to automation in the first place, right? Manual testing is inefficient, it's expensive, and it's risky. And even when we do move to automation, we think about building our own framework. And if you think about it a little bit, you'll find that the same reasons why we moved from manual to automation is you would see while building your own framework. So just a word of caution there. So finally, just takeaways from today's webinar. Gherkin and Cucumber truly accelerate test automation. Excellent tools to streamline the entire process. SmartBear provides you a great platform to start you on your journey towards test automation and eventually behavior-driven development. We do own the Cucumber Limited now. The pioneers of this movement are with SmartBear, so there's no better place to start your journey than SmartBear. And finally, don't create your own custom frameworks. Leave that to us, because that's all we do day in and day out. We spend a lot of time and effort based on problems that we can solve for you. So focus on delivering high quality software, and we'll build the framework for you. I believe we have one final poll, and I'll try to, we have 70 questions out there, so I definitely can't answer everything, but we have a couple of minutes. We do send a recording of this, right, Amy? So,
yes, we do. We'll send out the recording in the next couple days.
All right. Is HipTest in TestComplete? So HipTest is a different tool. It's a SaaS-based tool, so it's not embedded inside TestComplete. Just the synchronization is done really well via APIs. So so you have that. Is the tool integrated with Jira as a plugin? Yes. So there's Jira for bug tracking if you want to post bugs straight into Jira after this entire process. If you have Jira as another element in your ecosystem, you can just simply post your bugs very easily. Does the record and playback feature capture and create code for navigating through iframes? Yes. The application under test is independent of the features that we saw today, but iframes are pretty well supported within TestComplete. Does TestComplete bind step definitions of those definitions to features? Yes. So the features and the step definitions are bound through some internal algorithms that we have, and it's all Cucumber style. So yes, so you only create the feature, the automation code once, and if you need to reuse that specific step definition across other scenarios in Gherkin, you can do that as well. Is there an integration between TestComplete and TFS? Yes, we just released a very good integration with TFS and Azure DevOps in our last release in 14.2, where the similar real-time synchronization happens with the Azure test plans and TestComplete as well. So definitely encourage you to do that. Is TestComplete a replacement for Cucumber? Absolutely not. So Cucumber is just one aspect of it. It is a test runner. It's by no means a replacement at all. It is an open source independent project that we're putting in a lot of effort towards. So that's going to be continued to be maintained, to be made better, and everything that's done in Cucumber then gets translated into our TestComplete platform as well. Amy, let me know when we should stop.
Yeah, maybe a couple more questions.
All right. All right, let's see. How different is this tool from other automation tools like UFT, Selenium? So we get this question all the time. The couple of features that we saw today is probably not available in most automation tools out there. First of all, an embedded Gherkin editor. Very few tools have that. The ability to translate that into step definitions and automation code in the least effort way possible is also not there. So you don't have to write any code through scratch. And then the real-time integration with HipTest, there's no other tool that has that as well. So it's just so many benefits baked into one. that really hard to look beyond this. Let's see, I just want to get one more. So what other program languages other than JavaScript? So JavaScript, Python, VB script, and a couple of older ones like JScript and I forget the other one, JScript and I believe Delphi script, but I'm pretty sure not many people use Delphi script anymore. But it is supported in case you do want it. All right, there's a bunch of other questions, but I think Amy, we've run out of time here.
Yes, I think we are a couple minutes over. So thank you all for just staying with us. We really appreciate you taking out the time to join us today. We hope that you found this helpful, and a big thank you to Prashant for sharing all of this with us. And as a reminder, we will be sending out a recording of this session within the next couple days. So look out for that in your email, and hope to see you guys soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.